It's a truth near universally acknowledged amongst bookworms that the smell of books is very comforting. Whether old or new, the scent of books grounds us in reality as we venture forth into the various worlds that are uncovered through the pages of our favorite novels. And we love this scent so much so that it's been replicated through such as candles, perfumes, and fragrances. And the reverse is also true, in which there are plenty of companies focused on creating scent-based products such as candles, air fresheners, and perfumes based around fictional characters or fictional worlds. One of those companies is the BookBox Page and Wick, which does a special edition book and then also does a special candle run alongside it. So while this connection between books and scents is quite well founded, the recent sort of discussion around the recently announced special edition of, I believe it's called The Primal of Blood and Bone by Jennifer Armentrout, which is the recent installment, and I believe the For Blood and Ash series, or the spin-off to that series. I haven't actually read the series, so I don't 100% know. However, basically, Jennifer Armentrout and the publisher has teamed up with Hellmann's Mayonnaise to produce a garlic-infused edition of this book. The sort of rationale behind this unexpected collaboration being that the garlic scent of the mayonnaise will keep the vampires in the books away. While I understand that they're sort of trying to do something a little bit different than the classic book special edition, I do think that this is a pretty weird alternative to have gone with, especially to have chosen a food company of all things, because the book, from what I know, doesn't have a lot of food-based plot elements to it. I do understand that there is that connection between garlic and vampires, but the fact that it needs to be explained in the first place represents to me that this collaboration really isn't necessary for this kind of book. Not that it would be necessary really in any other circumstance, but it doesn't really feel like it fits with the theme of the book. I've seen some comments from people online talking about how they think maybe partnering up with a perfume company would have been a better choice, and I personally do agree with that, though I do still have some concerns about this notion of scented books in general. My first kind of concern would be whether or not these scented objects can hold up well. I think there's also maybe something to be brought up about environmental concerns as well. I'm not very scientifically inclined, so I don't know if there's any actual legitimate concerns to be brought up about that, but I wonder about the longevity of this, because things like a candle, for instance, you burn the wax and the scent will be gone because the wax will be gone. So I just wonder how long the scent of this will actually last, and whether or not, if it's very strong, if it could leak over into other products, like other books as well, because personally for me, if I were to have purchased a scented book, I would be kind of concerned about that scent maybe leaking over into other books, especially if it is a scent that I personally find unpleasant, which is garlic and mayonnaise, as a notorious mayonnaise hater. Another angle in which people have expressed concern about this product is from the consumerist angle as well. There's a lot of discussion within the book community about how specifically publisher special editions engage with an almost predatory sort of marketing style, typically labeled as FOMO, or fear of missing out, meant to encourage people to buy the book and make impulsive decisions because they might be worried that this special print run will run out. I personally am a book collector and a book reader. I do have a lot of special editions, many of which you can see from behind. So while I do understand those criticisms, and I do echo many of those criticisms, it would be hypocritical for me personally to sit here and be like, special editions suck, because I obviously love special editions. But this one, to me, feels a little bit differently than most special editions, because for me, what I value with special editions is specifically this sort of multifactory sensory experience that I get from being able to read that copy of the book. And I do get that this sort of scented book is also trying to give that sort of multifactory sensory experience as well, but I don't think that it's doing it in the same way, because a lot of other special editions that include things things like a sprayed edge or interior artwork or maybe extra chapters are meant to immerse you within the story by providing vivid imagery of certain scenes or providing an inside look at the author's experience as they work through the book, such as maybe an annotated chapter or a chapter that was cut out that has notes of why the author decided to cut out this chapter, but also why they still think that chapter is important enough to share in this special edition. With this scented book, on the other hand, it feels very consumerist from the perspective that they are teaming up with another company that really has had almost next to nothing to do with not just the book, but also the book community at large. When I was sort of thinking about this, I was like, it honestly would make more sense for the book to be like hot sauce themed because of like the trend around spicy books and using hot chili peppers to measure the spice scale of a book. Like personally, that would make more sense, though I also feel like that would be an unpleasant scent for most people. All around, the situation seems very strange to me, and I don't necessarily know why they thought this was like a good idea to do for a collaboration. Like, I don't know if any other elder Gen Z people like me remember back when we were kids and supermarkets used to do like collaborations with like upcoming Disney films or like DreamWorks films. Like there was like all these Shrek collaborations and stuff like that, and so it kind of feels a little bit like that, but I feel like it would have been better if it was a supermarket product as opposed to the book product, because people who are buying the book are going to buy food versus people who are buying food are less likely to be buying the book, because food is the necessity whereas the book is the extra sort of thing. So from a marketing standpoint, it makes more sense to do a food product with the book advertising than to do a book product with the food advertising. And I do think there are actually some examples of like book inspired food products. Like I think some people have done, this is largely like small businesses, but like drinks inspired by books, or I think I've seen ones where it's like a drink menu and it's like all inspired by ACOTAR or something. So it's not like a revolutionary concept to do food that is inspired by books or other forms of media. So I think that might have been a better approach. Like I was sort of saying about like the hot sauce and the spice ratings and stuff like that. You could introduce like a line of hot sauces that is like based on maybe like popular spicy book talk books or something like that. I don't know, I might have just given away $1 million business idea. I just feel like that might have been a better approach to doing this collaboration, because I don't necessarily think that there is something wrong with doing a collaboration with a sort of unexpected partner, which we're actually going to talk about a little bit later, because I have another example of a sort of similar case that's happened with a separate book. But I do believe that to a certain extent there should be some logic behind what that collaboration is, because if there isn't, it kind of just feels hollow and it doesn't make the quote-unquote special edition actually feel special, because it's not adding really anything to your experience in the way that a special edition with illustrations in it would. For me personally, there's probably some people who do not find any benefit from having those illustrations, but as someone who sort of does struggle with picturing the characters, especially for books that don't have character art on the covers, I find illustrations in the book or illustrated maps to be very beneficial for imagining the world and sort of kind of conceptualizing the world building in my mind when I do struggle with those things, especially as a fantasy reader. Overall, I think it's a weird situation. I don't think it's necessarily bad, but I do think that it is an interesting choice to have made, and I am kind of curious as to whether or not we're going to be seeing more scented books in the future, and hopefully if we do, they're nicer scents. Now, this situation with the new Jennifer L. Armentrout book is not the only sort of strange book marketing tactic that I have seen. I first heard about this sort of situation when the book was being sent out as ARC copies, so it actually brought to mind a situation with another book, and this happened last year, where alongside the packages containing the ARCs or advanced reader copies of these books, people also received unsolicited sex toys. Now, this was sent by the publisher, and I don't know if the author themselves had anything to do with this marketing. Did sort of try and look around social media for anything, and I wasn't able to find any sort of statement from the author themselves directly addressing this, but the book was The Pairing by Casey McQuiston. This caught a lot of flack online, largely because this was sent unsolicited and without people's consent. Typically, how you get PR packages from publishers is by signing up to their mailing list and then they just send them out to people. But not knowing in advance of what objects are going to be in that can cause a lot of issues for some people. For example, some people were tweeting out that they opened the box in front of their mother, which was a very awkward situation. Other people were saying that they were underage to receive these items, which is highly inappropriate. I don't necessarily know about the laws regarding whether or not like publishers can even send things out to minors in the first place. I mean, that would be a whole other topic, but it's not something that I have the knowledge of. And other people were just like, I'm uncomfortable with this. I didn't consent to receiving this item. I don't want this item. And yes, while the book itself explored those sexual themes, because I believe the book is all about two exes who somehow end up on the same trip with one another, and they basically make a bet of who can have sex with the most people while on this trip. So the book does contain adult themes, which is also makes me really question why it was sent out to minors in the first place, and makes me question whether or not, you know, the publisher knew in advance about the ages of those people. But overall, I just think it's a really awkward position to place readers in the first place, because I think if you're trying to send an object like that, it should be done with the person's consent, such as they obviously have the contact information of the people that they were sending these to in the first place. It would have been very easy to just send a couple of emails asking, hey, are you okay with receiving this item in this box that we've prepared? And that would also have made it so that the people receiving the book would have been people more likely to, I guess, maybe want to endorse it based on that, maybe, because, you know, some people on that mailing list might be receiving it and be uncomfortable with the sexual themes in the book in general, and typically if someone is more, you know, willing to receive a sex toy, they would probably be more willing to read a book with sexual themes discussed within it. I think it's reasonable to make that assumption. You might disagree. Yes, while the situation is different, because with the garlic scented book, there isn't anything that can be interpreted as inappropriate or anything that really, you know, requires someone's consent to have sent that product in the first place. But both of them, to me, are grouped in this same category of like weird decisions made by publishers to market a book. And I honestly wouldn't be surprised if we start seeing more of these sort of weird sort of tactics. Additionally, sort of veering off the original topic of weird collaborations related to books, there has also recently been announced that there is a new Fourth Wing special edition coming out. And unlike any other, this one you actually need to go to a hockey game to get. This is actually a collaboration, seems to have been personally arranged by Rebecca Yarros and her publisher with NHL team the Colorado Avalanche, in which you can buy tickets to attend this game and you will get this special edition of Fourth Wing. This isn't a new thing for sports teams at all. Like, my grandmother loves the Blue Jays and she always has them on, and they're like always doing these giveaways. They have bobbleheads, special shirts. I think they even did a Harry Potter thing at one point, which, I mean, there could be some criticism just because it's Harry Potter there. And even doing a book related product is not a new thing, but I still think this specific instance is a little bit strange in my opinion. I have some complicated thoughts on this specific iteration. I first want to start off by saying that I don't think there's anything problematic about this, as the sort of intention behind this special edition is, one, to raise money for EDS charities, which is one of the chronic illnesses that Rebecca Yarros herself has, and also the one that Violet in Fourth Wing has. So it's going towards supporting a good cause. The second one is that I largely think that this is also meant to encourage women to come to the hockey games and, you know, spend a fun night with their families. I feel like largely this sort of tactic of trying to market towards a female consumer base has largely sort of exploded as a result of Taylor Swift and Travis Kelce beginning to date. Of course, they are now engaged, and for the most part, that has brought a lot of women into being interested in sports for the first time. And on a separate note, we've also been seeing an expansion in sports romances that isn't fully correlated to the Taylor Swift-Travis Kelce relationship, but has had a boom in popularity since that relationship became public. However, there was also, and this happened a couple of years ago, so I'm not sure how well people remember it, but there was a huge sort of scandal almost where the newly created NHL team, the Seattle Kraken, decided to have book influencers come to their hockey games and provide almost like free PR and marketing, specifically marketing off of the spicy end of book talk in relation to sports romance, which, as someone who has been a part of sports communities ever since they were young, in particular grew up as a hockey fan and experienced a lot of, I don't want to say discrimination, but a lot of sort of maybe indirect misogyny, both from other women and guys, such as being accused of only being interested in sports because I thought the players were attractive. I could see that this tactic of book talk marketing was going to go down the drain as soon as it started, and that really came to a head when specifically one of the creators named Kiara Lewis basically was posting a lot of thirsty TikToks, so to speak, about one particular player, and that player and his wife made a public statement asking her and the community at large to stop posting these things as it was making him and their family very uncomfortable. Her response to it was largely very negative, which honestly, based on the way that she reacted, I really don't understand how, you know, she still continues to have a book platform, because the way that she was talking to this player and his wife was extremely disrespectful. But I also think that there is a larger issue to be discussed about how the Seattle Kraken and the NHL themselves went about this situation, because this kind of content about the hockey players never would have been brought to their attention without the intervention of the NHL team themselves supporting these creators, because they publicly endorsed this rhetoric and this kind of style of marketing to bring people into watching their games. And I think that they deserve criticism for having, you know, perpetuated this, which has not only harmed their players, but has also harmed their existing fan base. Because, like I just said, most girls like me who grew up liking sports, we experienced a lot of negative reactions to our interests. People would say that we were only interested because we found the guys attractive, or because we wanted other guys to like us, and that we were pretending to be not like other girls. And I do think that there is something to be said about sports romances at large, especially which books and which trends are popular now, about how they continue to perpetuate notions of, you know, gender segregation, so to speak, because with books like Icebreaker or I think it's called Spiral, for instance, the hockey player is always the male character, whereas the female character, even though she is an athlete, typically tends to be an athlete of more feminine sports like figure skating or ballet. I personally am a huge proponent that, like, ballet, figure skating, they are so tough, and all of the people who engage in those sports deserve recognition for their work. And I do think that it is important to celebrate, like, traditionally girly things as well. And there is a whole history behind things like ballet as well that correlates a lot to sort of the history around women's rights as well. But I do think it's very concerning that we are seeing presentation that this is the way we should fit into the gender roles roles, that the man should be playing the more violent or traditionally recognized sport, while the women should be more interested in classically feminine things or things that are more graceful or elegant or whatnot. And obviously right now with the release of Taylor Swift's new album, there's a lot of criticism being levied against her about, she said in this one interview where she's like, Travis is putting his life on the line playing football, and it's like, what? What do you mean? He's playing a sport. He's not going to war. That's not meant to be like a hateful comment, but it's just a weird way of framing things personally, and I think that we need to stand up against these kind of ideas around men do this and women do this, and these are the sports that women should do and these are the sports that men should do, because they do conceptualize our views of gender stereotypes and also, you know, gender interaction of who gets to be a hockey fan, who gets to be a figure skating fan. And I do think that some of these sports romances have actually worked to unpack those kind of themes. I know Mariana Zapata, for instance, wrote one where both the characters are figure skaters and does sort of work to dispel some of those narratives. I haven't actually read that book, but I have read her other book, The Wall in Winnipeg and Me, and I did really enjoy that one as someone who does like sports, so that would be a good recommendation for me. And once again, this isn't meant to be like hateful towards any of those books or their authors, and I do think that there is an opportunity here with sort of this recent boom in sports romance that I think is only going to implode even more with the release of the off-campus TV series, which I think is going to fill the summer I turned pretty hole for a lot of people. So I do think that there is a chance to sort of combat some of these pre-existing narratives about this is who gets to be a hockey fan, or I do think it is also important to be aware about how companies can use this sort of marketing tactic in an almost predatory way. I mean, with Icebreaker, there was a lot of these videos going viral on TikTok about like making our players read Icebreaker. It wasn't done out of like a genuine interest in the book. It was sort of kind of felt a little bit like they were just bullying. I get that that maybe wasn't the intention, but as a girl who was sort of made fun of or excluded on the basis that my interest in sports wasn't as authentic as a boy's just because of my gender, it kind of just takes me back to those feelings and feels like we're sort of just regurgitating those same sort of messages just in a different packaging. So that was a bit of a tangent off of the initial sort of Fourth Wing edition. I do think there is maybe another concern about the fact that Fourth Wing is such a popular series and there is so many special editions of it, yet there still is a lot of like scalpers out there. So this is going to be probably going to be like one of the more rarer editions of the book. And I guess there's also some criticism to be made about the fact that, like, is it really necessary to have done this in the first place? It's going towards a good cause, so I don't think that there's anything inherently negative with this product, but I do have some concerns about the messaging behind it that I don't think are necessarily intentional, but is more so just something that has always kind of irked me about the discourse regarding sports and regarding sports romance. So that was my 2 cents on the matter. And I probably could do an entire video kind of dissecting more about sports romance, but I largely do not read the genre because it makes me uncomfortable, because like I sort of mentioned with the off-campus series, like I read the first book and I didn't like it largely because there were so many inaccuracies about the hockey stuff in there, such as ignoring that the NHL draft exists, for example. But once again, no hate towards any of the authors. It's just me being very critical about things. Alright, so I think that brings an end to our discussion. I know I kind of went a little bit off of the initial topic, but I've just been kind of really interested in this whole like unexpected book collaborations that have become popular as of late. And also feel free to let me know about what your thoughts are on the matter. Like, what do you think of this garlic scented edition? Are you interested in maybe the future of scented books, or are you like, no, this is so weird? And about PR stuff with with the book The Pairing as well. Do you have any concerns maybe about what items might be sent in PR? Do you think that there should be some sort of aspect of publishers getting the consent of people before they send out objects like that, or even just sending out the books in general? Because there's also a lot of discussion in the book community about whether or not people actually read the advanced reader copies, as well as people selling them later on, which is actually illegal to do. With the third point as well, do you think that recent hockey special edition of Fourth Wing are valid? Do you have any other concerns or maybe critiques about the trends in sports romances that we're seeing today? And also, if you liked what I said about that, would you be interested in listening maybe to another video on that topic, as it is something that I feel I'm interested enough to explore further and in more depth. So feel free to let me know what you thought about this video and about some of the topics that we talked about today. And once again, thank you for watching, and goodbye.